Chapter 2, Section 5. Our essential question that we need to answer is how can you multiply decimals? Key idea, I would like you to write this information down. Multiplying decimals by whole numbers, write the words, multiply as you would with whole numbers, then count the number of decimal places in the decimal factor. The product has the same number of decimal places. And then write out the two examples. When you're done, come back to this video. Let's take a look at example 1. In A, it's 6 times 3.91, or 3 and 91 hundredths. Notice the first thing they're having you do is estimate the two numbers, which is always good. The next thing I want you to notice is they did it up and down versus across. They multiplied just like regular, and then what they did is they said, okay, how many decimal places are to the right of the decimal? There are 2. So there has to be 2 to the right of the decimal in the answer. So once we do that, we get an answer of 23.46. And if you would have estimated it, which they did, you would have come up with 24. So your answer is reasonable. Same thing over here. The only difference in your problem is there are 3 decimal points in 3 numbers to the right of the decimal point. That 0 does count because it's holding a place in the decimal. Again, they did estimation. The estimation was 0, and notice it's 0.048, which is below 1, so your answer is reasonable. Example 2, use mental math. How high is a stack of 100 dimes? Method 1, multiply 1.35 by 100. Once you get your answer, simple enough, but once you get your answer, here's your decimal point. There's only 2 decimal places to the right. There's no decimal in 100, or decimal point. That's method 1. Method 2, you are multiplying by a power of 10. Use mental math. So what they did was they took 1.35 times 100. All right? There are 2 zeros in 100. So what you need to do is for every 0 you add, you must move the decimal point 1 to the right. Okay, let's try to talk about that a little more. So I have 1 and 35 hundredths. Well, if I only put 1 0 on there, this 1 has to be in the tens. We go from just ones to tens. So if I move my decimal point to the right, then 13 is my new number, which is in the tens. 10 and 3, 13. In this case, I have 2 zeros. So when I move them to the right, my new number becomes 135. Again, hundredths. Whereas in here, you have 2 decimal places. They're not asking about money, so I can drop those zeros. So my answer is a stack of 100 dimes is 135 millimeters high. Notice the label. Do the on your own and come back when you're done. Example 3. Your notes are on page 87. It says the rule for multiplying 2 decimals is similar to the rule for multiplying a decimal by a whole number. You don't have to write that sentence down. The part with the key idea is what you do have to write down. In words, it says multiply as you would with whole numbers, then add the number of decimal factors in the factors, decimal places in the factors, the sum of the number of decimal places in the product. So they give you an example using numbers. If you would please go ahead and put that in your notes. Come back when you're done. All right, let's take a look. We have 4.8 times 7.2. Once again, we've got an estimation, always to check your work. They wrote the problem up and down, or 0.8 times 7.2. So you're doing 8 times 2 and 4 times 2 plus 1, so 96. Then you do the number to the left. You go in one spot and you write 48 times 7, which would be 336. Now, you add them up when you're all finished. You go back up to the problem and you count all digits to the right of the decimal. And in this case, you have two numbers that have decimals. You count them both. So you have 1, 2, and that's how you place it in your number. Okay? They figured it out. They checked to see if 34.56 is reasonable, and it was. All right, now let's look at B. Multiply 3.5 times 0.05. So here we have 3.1. Here we have 0.05. Now in multiplication, it's key to know that you do not line up your decimal places. And if you need to write this down somewhere, please do. You need to line up your decimal places in adding and subtracting. You do not need to line them up in multiplication. All right, so we did the multiplication, and then we counted 1, 2, 3. We started all the way to the right. We've got 1, 2, 3, and there's your decimal point. Again, they checked to see if it was reasonable, and 0.155 is about 0. Please do the on your own 6 through 9 and come back. Section 4, the title is Evaluating an Expression, and you're going to hear that a lot in this book. It says, what is the value of 2.4 times, notice there's no X, there's no dot. Anytime you have a number right next to a parenthesis, you know it's multiplication. So this is multiplication. Then we have 4.5 minus 3.175. So what is the value means what is the answer? Step 1. Subtract first because the minus sign is in the parentheses. Okay? So look at your parentheses. And you have to do that first. Though subtraction is lower on PEMDAS, the parentheses have to be done first. Your new problem then would be 1.325, which is the subtraction of the two numbers in the parentheses right here. And then you'd have 2.44 times 1.325. Right next to the parentheses gives us the answer. Then, or it tells us it's multiplication, I apologize. Then you can take these numbers and write them out in step 2 to figure out your answer. Notice we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once all your numbers are written down, you have to make sure you have 5 numbers to the right of the decimal point. All right, next thing you're doing is on your own, 10 and 11, show all your work, come back. Example 5, here's your real life application. When are we ever going to use this? You buy 2 3/4 pounds of tomatoes, same as 2.75. You hand the cashier a $10 bill. How much change will you receive? Well, we have to know the cost of the tomatoes. And if we look on our chart, the tomatoes are $1.89 a pound. It says here you buy 2 3/4 pounds of these tomatoes. So you multiply the tomato, the cost, by how much you bought. All right? You get an answer, you go back up, you count 1, 2, 3, 4 decimal places, and they do have 4 decimal places over here. So now you know the cost of 2 3/4 pounds of tomatoes. It's $5.20 because you have a 7 here. You bump it up to $5.20. Now you have to subtract the cost of the tomatoes from the amount of money you handed the cashier. Here you go, your $10 minus $5.20. You get $4.80 change. Simple enough. Just like we've been doing. But believe it or not, even though a lot of times we do these things in our head, there is a method to doing them. Do the on your own number 12 and show your work, and I'll see you in class tomorrow.